Thank you, Ann. We have another one of these long stories from John 11, verses 1 to 45 on page 91 in the New Testament section. To look back at the psalm for just a minute, what is it that you wait for in the morning? I don't know about you, but I wait for the paper to show up. I wait for the coffee to get done. I can't control the paper, but I can control the coffee. I wait. I long as much as those who watch for the morning. And the image is of somebody who's a watchman on the wall. Why are they waiting for the morning? Because the night's scary. That's when the enemy can sneak up. And in the morning, the light shines. And we're safe. More than the watchman waits for the morning, I wait on God. This is the story that sets the stage now as we go into the Gospel of John for the events that are coming around Jesus' own death and resurrection. John is the last gospel written, as near as we can tell from how various parts are assembled in contrast with each other. John also writes it in a whole different format where Jesus keeps going up to Jerusalem, and in this case he's in Bethany, which is just outside Jerusalem, having come up from Jericho. And he has these confrontations throughout the gospel with various people in the leadership. Well, this time he's just outside that. He's on the backside of the ridge of the Mount of Olives in the little village of Bethany where Lazarus and Mary and Martha live. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." And so they came down, or over from where they were. The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you." And remember, Jews means the Jewish leaders, not everybody. "The Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." Referring to these leaders. After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." And the disciples said to him, "Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will be all right." Amazingly literal. If his fever's broken, he'll be okay. Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, this is the same one who says, "I have to see him after the resurrection." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." This is the charged atmosphere. They've already had confrontations with the leaders in Jerusalem, and now Jesus is coming back to just on the edge. It's entirely possible their lives are in danger. Somebody said that maybe Jesus really thought he could be the Messiah who would lead an army, a nonviolent army against Rome and free the people. I think Jesus was a lot smarter than that. If you know that you're going to go up against the might of the Roman army, there is only one outcome. You're going to catch it. Jesus knows this. Jesus goes ahead anyway. And this is part of him coming to Jerusalem and getting ready. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews, the Jewish leaders, had come to Mary and Martha to console with them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. I want you to contrast how these same words can be spoken differently by the two sisters. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, and this is the context in which this verse comes, "I am the resurrection and the life." Remember, I am is the name of God. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Now that's a generalized answer. That isn't what he was asking. He was asking, do you believe that Lazarus isn't dead? And she gave him a church answer, a nice theological summary. And did you hear a note of blame in her voice to Jesus? "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Keep going. When Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher, the rabbi, is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him on the road. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Remember, this is 4 days. What's important about 4? Because 3 days is how long in a time when you can't really prove death, that if somebody goes into a coma, you figure if they don't wake up after 3 days, they're not going to wake up. The other point is, if they really died 3 days ago, by the 4th day, they'll be huge. Things will happen to their bodies, and it will be indisputable that they are dead. They followed Mary because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Now she's weeping. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. Notice the difference? "Lord, if you'd been here, he'd have been all right." Versus, "Lord, if you'd shown up." It's the difference of, "Well, if you'd been here on time, your grandma would still be here." Oh, what a guilt trip. Versus, "We're so glad you made it to say goodbye to Grandma." Jesus said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus began to weep. Now, that means it's no longer the shortest verse in the Bible. In the King James, this is the one, Tom Sawyer always used it, right? Winning Sunday school contest for memorization, Jesus wept, shortest verse in the Bible, right there. Not the same quite translation anymore. Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, now remember, last week we talked about the man born blind who was healed. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? If he's such a hot healer, how come he hasn't taken care of his friend? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. They roll a round stone to shut the door. Runs a little track. Takes 2 or 3 people to open it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, the practical one, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he's been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But, going on one verse, some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. There's a lot of stuff packed into that story. Just to read it properly takes half of the sermon time, which is why we're only going to contrast 2 things. The 2 sisters. They are contrasted in other Gospels. Mary and Martha. Martha's busy cooking supper. Martha is getting the aloha hour ready. Martha is the one who cuts out and makes sure the sandwiches are ready on time. Mary sits with Jesus and listens to the story. Martha comes out and says, "Lord, tell my sister to help." You ever get that way? I'm doing the work. She's sitting in there with the guest. What's that about? Get out here in the kitchen and help me. But she didn't do that. She didn't even talk to her sister. She said to Jesus, "Tell my sister she's supposed to come over here." That's even a little snottier, right? So, Martha gets things done. But sometimes she does people. She hurts people while she's at it. And you can hear in her voice this very practical, hard-nosed, get the job done woman who says, "Jesus, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died." And then there's Mary. "Lord, if you'd come, he wouldn't have died. I know that." Which reaction? Which one's typical for you or for me? I come from a very judgmental land. It's called the proper province of Iowa. Everybody's certified. Everybody has proof that they know what they're doing. Everybody is very organized in their own small town way. And mess up, and without a word being spoken, you know you've been noticed, and not in a good way. A lot of us grew up with some of that. Maybe it wasn't overt, but we were told what was right and how to do it. And we were expected to do it the right way. That's Martha. Mary, on the other hand, says, I need to hear him. I need to be in his presence. I need to be healed by his presence among us. And now that he's here, something will happen. And the something that happens is that their brother is raised to life. Now, I want you to notice a kind of funny little detail. There's only one way for Lazarus to get out of the tomb. His hands and his feet are bound, right? He has to hop to get out. Now, I always think that's kind of odd that they have that little detail. It's either that or he has to shinny across the floor. And so various artists have covered it in various ways. But if your hands and feet are tied and you've just woke up from being dead, what are you going to do? You're stuck. But Jesus said, come forth. And that's a word of command. And so Lazarus does. What if Lazarus had said, no, thank you. I'm fine. Dead is okay. And he says, nope, not coming out, Jesus, forget it. There are some of us who get so discouraged that we want to say that when Jesus calls. But better to be the faithful sister who said, now that you're here, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And you're here now. So we can trust him to be with us now. Now, it raises one final question. What if you don't believe this story happened? What if you really don't buy the idea that Jesus raised people from the dead back in the day? Now, I have no problem that he could have. I'm just not sure he did. And that these stories may be stories about his power rather than descriptions of actual events. But I have no problem with it being an actual event either. But I know where this story is headed. This story is headed to explain that Jesus, who has the power of life and death in Lazarus' life, this very Jesus will give his life. It won't be stolen from him. He will give it so that we might live. And the very one who has the power to raise others to life will die for us. That's what John is getting ready to say in the most powerful kind of language possible. And that's why the raising of Lazarus is an important story and why it's just over the hill from Jerusalem. Our hymn is Breathe on Me, Breath of God.